This is a podcast about both having autism and living with someone who has autism. My mom is Sonya, and I'm Josh, and this is Josh Has Autism.
Hey everybody, thanks for stopping by again.
Hello.
So Josh and I are here together again.
Yeah.
And you said something yesterday, I think it was, that made me think of what I want to talk about today. And that was one of my favorite movies of all time is Clue. There's so many funny lines in that movie. Oh my gosh. Yeah. One of them, they say 1 + 1 + 2 + 1, or 1 + 2 + 1 + 1, right?
Or something like that, yeah.
Yeah, okay. So...
And they're just arguing back and forth how many shots were fired. Right.
And you had your last class of the semester, a math class, and the teacher said...
It was something like 1 + 2 + 4 + 3 + 2. And I'm like, 1 + 2 + 2 + 1. And he looked at me funny.
Oh, so you said it out loud.
Yeah, I did.
Yeah. All right, cool. Well, what it made me think about is that one of the things that you learned was about humor.
Yeah.
Because I remember when you were a little guy, you wouldn't get jokes, you know.
I take them literally?
Yeah, you would take things literally. But I'm just wondering about that. It got me thinking about it, because in the math class that happened, and you thought of this movie, and you thought that it was funny, and you shared it, and you were comfortable in doing that. For those of us in the family... You know, that we all know that movie, that would be perfect. You know, that would really be funny. Yeah. It was funny, even though the teacher didn't get it.
Right.
Yeah. So it made me wonder something, and that is that you've talked to me before and told me how conversation, there's an awful lot going on during a conversation with you that maybe we don't see happening. Like you're trying to anticipate what somebody is expecting or what they're actually saying or the nuances that you're looking at. The you know, we could say body language, but that's probably a different podcast altogether. So what I was wondering about is that do you laugh at some things because you've seen us laughing at them? So then they must be funny?
Unfortunately, I think you're going to be disappointed because I think that I find it funny, so that's why I laugh.
No, I think that's awesome. I think that's awesome. I guess what I'm saying is that there's so many things that you've worked at to be able to participate in a conversation. Yeah. So in your life, you really put it out a great deal of effort to be able to, for example, to stay the space from people when you're talking to them, to allow them to finish a sentence, to, you know, it's the back and forth of it, to, all of that stuff. And I just didn't know if in the beginning, did you recognize that something was funny because you had seen us respond to something, and did that help?
I know that from an early age, I would help you with writing different jokes and things like that.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Where you'd bounce ideas off me, I'd say, no, that's no good. Try to word it this way.
Right.
And it usually works.
It did. A lot of times you would come at it from a totally different angle than I was working on.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so many times I would have a bit that I couldn't get just right. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I would say, okay, Josh, listen to this one. And then sure enough, you would say, well, sometimes you'd say, that's just not funny. And sometimes you'd say, come at it from this way. You know, but by that time you were probably in high school. So, you had learned an awful lot.
Yeah.
And I'm just wondering, does humor something that is easy for you now to read with people? Like, do you feel like you...
Now? Yeah. I still sometimes have trouble. Let's say if someone talks like this and doesn't have any emotion into their voices. And
so they're monotone.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
But there's no real difference between them joking and them being completely serious.
Okay.
It's very difficult for me to tell. I think it's difficult for most people to tell if they're joking or not. But
I think that's probably like a deadpan style or a really dry sense of humor.
Not even that sometimes, because that's how they naturally talk.
Oh.
Like,
okay.
I know a guy now who does that.
Okay.
Who just naturally talks like that.
All right, with no inflection?
Right.
Okay. And does he make a joke sometimes with no inflection?
Yes.
And does he have to tell you that was a joke?
Sometimes.
but probably not just you, right?
Right, it's everybody.
Most people don't get his humor that he's joking, probably.
Right.
Yeah.
And most of the time, he's not even smiling whenever he does this, so it's like really hard to tell. So,
is he funny?
He is. He is very witty, very sarcastic, and it's awesome. The only part I have difficulty saying is when he's actually joking or not.
Right.
So
some of it might get lost on not just you, but anybody that has a conversation with him, because he slips it in.
Yeah.
And you don't see it coming.
Yeah.
I think that's pretty cool, actually.
Yeah.
Right.
And I mean, growing up with you as my mom it's not just because you're a comedian that I'm as good as I am at humor. I would say it was a great portion of it helped. Mm-hmm. But with that being said, just your natural sense of humor and how you say things and do things and your point of view of how you see things really influenced how I came across things. Because you would always tell me things like, be yourself. To look at things from your point of view, not from everyone else's.
Right. Yeah. And what I think you might be referencing is that it was super important, I thought, for you to hear often that the doctors are, we have to use these words because that's how everybody communicates. So we're,
words generally do that.
Well, it means that you kind of like, I didn't want you to be labeled as something, and meaning that label would confine you to something. Right? So I wanted you to know that your way is not wrong. We're not saying that. We're not saying that you have to change who you are. Change, the only thing that we tried to do was to get you to be able to do things in society that were going to help you in the long run.
Right.
I was never interested in getting you to conform to anybody's way. I just didn't want you to get in trouble.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, by the time you turned 18, I wanted you to know about space and about, don't touch anybody and you can't, like when, we talked before about how you wiped out the whole class getting to the front of the line, right? Like, you had to learn by the time you're 18, you can't do that.
Yeah.
That kind of stuff. But I've always thought that you were funny. I've always thought that you were funny, and sometimes you're funny
looking. No.
You look like your dad.
So I'm funny looking?
So I'm saying.
She threw her hands up in the air.
It's not my fault. But there are times when you would try to make jokes and I could see what you were doing. I could see what you were going for.
And it completely falls flat.
It completely would fall flat, or it was completely insulting. Do you remember doing that? Yes. Yeah. So you would say something, and I would go, oh, and you would go, and you'd realize that what you just did wasn't, but you would ask too. You go, that didn't work. And, so we would talk about it, and, so is humor something that in everyday conversation is, you just described your one friend. Mm-hmm. Are there times when there's something funny and you don't get the humor of it? Or do you feel like you've got a pretty good grasp of humor at this point? At this point, I'd say I have a pretty good grasp on it. There are still times where I have difficulty understanding if it's a joke or what the point of the joke is. Mm-hmm. But for the most part, I'm pretty good at it now. Well, that's cool. Yeah. What was the toughest part growing up with as far as humor goes? Figuring out what was funny to me wasn't necessarily funny to everyone else. Okay. And vice versa. Yeah, right. That's I think that's the way that it is. Through time, I think humor has changed too. Mm-hmm. But I mean, there's some people that are gonna laugh at like somebody slipping on a banana peel. Like all the slapstick comedies the slapstick and cartoons and stuff. Yeah, right. Like Charlie Chaplin and the Three Stooges and that kind of humor. Yeah. There's the humor of Abbott and Costello. Yes. Remember who's on first? Yeah. That's always been one of my favorites. But that one was a great play on words. Yes. Oh my gosh. Yes. Uh-huh. And that's a perfect example of why I wanted to learn so much about the English language. Was so that I could communicate as well as that while still having a sense of humor about it. Mm-hmm. I mean, think about it. Who's on first? That's somebody's last name is who. and they're talking about the baseball player who is on first. Right. Mm-hmm. Who's on first? I don't know. Right. No, he's on third. Yeah. Yes. Right. I think it was brilliant. Yeah. Mm-hmm. It was probably one of the greatest early pieces of comedy I've ever come across. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. There have been times when you were like in elementary school and in middle school where I would be around you and quite a few other young boys with autism. And you would have conversations, and I would just watch these conversations. Mm-hmm. They were very matter of fact, mm-hmm. and to the point, and absolute. And devoid of humor. Yes. Yes. Yeah. I think once I started getting towards the 8th grade or so, mm-hmm. I started realizing how... Excuse me. I started realizing how humor works a lot better. Mm-hmm. And so I remember some of the later times I was with these other your groups? Yeah, other kids with autism mm-hmm. that didn't have a grasp of humor yet. Mm-hmm. And I'd try and make a joke, and they'd just stare at me. Mm-hmm. Or they'd say, "That's not realistic." Right, sure.
Or something like that.
Absolutely. Because what I'm trying to say is that along with you doing the things that... I remember at one point, one of the things that you were working on was to, instead of saying something, you would just count to a certain number and give yourself a time for that to register what was being said and then to process an answer.
Mm-hmm.
And it was also to help to de-stress and just in conversation, because conversation used to be very stressful for you.
Yeah.
And what the reason that I'm bringing up humor today is because among all the other things that are part of conversation in everyday life is humor.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that people, it's true, like you can use, people have a different way of speaking. Conversations can vary from even region to region. But you know what? Each person has their own type of sense of humor. And so for you, a sense of humor, when you're learning this, it's not the same. So it seems like that, we worked on it a lot.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
I made a lot of bad jokes.
Yeah, but we spent a lot of time on it.
Yeah.
We did. We spent a lot of time on what's funny, why is humor important, how do you put it into conversation,
and timing of it.
Correct.
Oh my gosh, timing was such a big part of it.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember I still sometimes have difficulty with this, where I try and have a comeback ready.
Mm-hmm.
Or not ready, but like someone tells me a joke or it's a witty one-liner kind of thing, and I try and have a comeback. And I remember growing up, I didn't have that. I could not come up with things until like 5 minutes later.
Right.
And by then the joke was over.
Right, but you would say it anyway.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I found that recently I've been doing comebacks.
Okay, cool.
Immediately.
Yeah?
And it's ridiculous how awesome that feels.
It's pretty good, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because they're even funny.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. You hear this ding, 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 ding. Like, you got it.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's pretty cool. Is it something that you have to work out now?
Not really.
That's cool.
Yeah. I mean, sometimes. Mm-hmm. Sometimes I think of, how can I make this funny and make a joke real quick? No.
That's interesting. What you just did, is that how it is for a lot of things too, though?
Uh-huh.
Is it like it's for...
Oh, you're asking me.
Yeah. Is it for like, do I respond now or I respond later? Are they joking? Are they serious? Are they upset? Are they okay? Do they... Because you'll say...
Sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, sometimes I have difficulty thinking of the right words I want to say.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes you need an answer right away for something.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not something I can do. Like, it's not something that I can... It seems reasonable enough. And it is reasonable enough for me to have an answer for you just like that.
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes my mind just cannot process it or something. And it makes it so much more difficult for me to give you an answer.
Right. And sometimes, if we're in a conversation, you're like, it's your turn. It takes a long time. You just need, those few extra beats to get your thoughts together. Yeah. I think somebody explained it one time as like there's a Rolodex in there, like your file cabinet. Yeah. And you're going through your file cabinet and you pull out the right words or the sentiment that fits.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right. So, yeah. So, what else should we talk about with humor? You like reading funny stories?
Sometimes, yeah. Sometimes I read stories that are completely serious and they just throw a random thing in there that is absolutely hilarious. And it's like, I start cracking up.
Right.
and then people look at me weird. But
well, excuse me.
But but some things are. If you ever read the book Canterbury Tales, this is like one of the oldest examples of this.
Okay.
Canterbury Tales, for those who don't know, is a story about Geoffrey Chaucer and a group of people that he is going on a pilgrimage with. And there's a bet that happens at the beginning of the pilgrimage of who can tell the best story. So this is a story about people trying to outdo each other's stories.
Right.
And some of them are raunchy, some of them are heroic, some of them are just bad. And the way it's described, if you read the whole thing, you finally realize, hey, this story happens almost within like half an hour of beginning to end, time wise, not reading wise, but actual time frame.
Right.
And it's just people bantering back and forth with each other. People don't really consider that with writing anymore. At least not in the grand scale that this was, because it's like 30 stories from a different person each time.
Right.
And the guy who's writing them all down, Geoffrey Chaucer, is actually a character named after the author, Geoffrey Chaucer.
Right.
So it's pretty cool.
Right. Right.
And this humor that's used in it, like I said, it's like how different people would tell a story. Like I said, some of the humor was crude, some of it was spot on, some of it was like, really? But it was all different kinds of humor.
Right. I wonder if you get it was also helpful because a lot of my friends are comedians.
That too.
So you've known and you know a lot of comedians, don't you?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah. There's been a lot of different funny people at the house.
Oh yeah. Definitely.
Yeah. And I think that they all engaged you as well.
Yeah.
So that was always pretty cool.
Yeah. I mean, I've met so many comedians.
Yep.
And each of them, I mean, heck, I sold a joke to one of them.
Bobby Collins.
Yeah.
Yep.
I sold him a joke.
Yes, you did. It's hysterical. Yeah. Yep, I remember that. Do you have any recommendations? Because what we're talking about right now is something that initially humor didn't come, what we'll just say, naturally to you.
Right. I took things too literally. I took things in a realistic manner. And it didn't fit with how my mindset worked. Correct.
So what recommendation do you have for the kids that might be autistic, that could benefit from learning how to integrate humor into their lives and their conversations?
Well, I'd say the first step
would be learn how to use and accept others using exaggerations.
It's fantastic advice.
Yeah, because once you understand that things aren't in absolutes all the time, that people say one thing but may mean another, that it makes it so much easier to communicate in general once you understand that. And once you accept that.
Right.
And it's not so much that people are lying to you, no. It's that people make jokes. They try and have humor in what they say. And they use exaggerations of things. I can tell you 1,000,001 things on top of that. That's an exaggeration.
Yes. Right. I can remember you as a little guy telling me that something was a lie, and us having this conversation that it's not a lie, it was a joke.
Yeah.
It was a joke. And then so I can remember that so clearly, exactly what you're talking about. And yeah, I think that's fantastic advice, because once that's worked on, once that begins to once that understanding happens,
it broadens your view of the world.
Correct. Yeah. Yep. I think that's amazing advice. It's fantastic. Yeah.
The next step is, if you are trying to joke with people that know you well, like your family or your close friends, that even your family know are close friends. And double check with them. Ask them, was that funny, or was that...
yeah, you would ask me sometimes, was that okay?
Yeah, was that an acceptable thing to say? Because there are some jokes that are funny that are not acceptable in front of some people. Like, there are some kind of jokes that are called inside jokes, that are essentially, they have history between you and another person. That doesn't mean that outside people are going to get it.
Right, because they don't have the point of reference.
Right.
Yep.
Right.
Yep. So your second bit of advice would be that to, like, go for it. Feel free. Make jokes. Say things that are funny. Do it with your family, so that they can help to guide at
what's
first.
okay and what's not. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, to joke with your family first, before trying it at school or something.
Right. That's really good advice.
Yeah.
Yep, I like that one too. Anything else?
Keep working at it.
Yeah.
That's really it, is that the more experience you get, the more understanding of what is funny and what is not, and what is acceptable and what is not. And it just takes more experience. And you'll be joking back and forth and bantering and and having a good time.
Right.
And jokes are meant to be funny, to make people laugh. They are not meant to bully others.
Right. Yes.
They're not meant to put down somebody.
That's right. That's a whole different version of funny.
Yeah.
And that's not what we're talking about.
Right.
You don't. Yeah. Right. So you would say that the jokes are not meant to hurt somebody at all. They're just funny. They're light. They're funny.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Good deal. Well, Josh. I think that was excellent advice. I don't know how we can top that. I think your advice is perfect. It's spot on.
It's because I'm awesome.
It's because you're awesome. That's right. Hey, thanks everybody for hanging out with us again today. We appreciate it so much. You can find us on SonyaKing.com, on Twitter at Sonya King Comedy. And this is Josh Has Autism.
Yeah.
Yeah. And thank you so much. And I love you.
Have a good night. Bye.